what a blessing it was for me too, in the midst of that pandemic, having taken a leap of faith of my own in March of last year, and just trusting in providence that something would come together, and surely something did, and I have no doubt that this is where God wants me to be right now, in the midst of you good people here at the Mount Lebanon United Methodist Church. Mr. President, if you would shine up my first slide. Thank you, sir. So, "Oh come, let us sing unto the Lord," when John asked me to provide a title, was immediately what came to my mind from Psalm 95, as you see up there, conventionally used as, sometimes called the Venite, used as one of the traditional calls to worship in the English language church. So I thought, well, gosh, I guess that would be fitting. We should invite us all to worship. Then on the next slide, I believe I have a couple words about the hymn. Yeah, so this may be a hymn that's kind of unfamiliar, maybe to some of you. This is part of my ethos as director of music, right? I got to give you some of the chestnuts sometimes, the "Great is thy faithfulness" and so forth, the ones that we know so well we could probably sing them in our sleep. But I also think that part of my duty is to challenge y'all and to make sure that we leave no page unturned, as it were, in this hymn. So this is a contemporary hymn. It's actually a communion hymn, but I think it unifies a lot of themes all together. It's kind of untraditional, non-traditional, maybe I should say, as you'll find. It was written, first published in 1968 by a Lutheran pastor from Ohio. His name was Yaroslav Vaida. I was surprised when I found out he was from Ohio. I thought maybe he was from Budapest or something. But his parents were from Budapest or something. But like a good American, he has roots elsewhere. So he had the following. He's passed away a couple of years ago. He had the following to say about the text. "The reversed order of the doxology not only expressed the order in which I, the author, pictured the Trinity coming to us in worship, but also the order in which the incarnation took place, the visitation of the angel, then the epiphany, that word meaning revelation, of the fullness of God through his incarnate Son, Jesus, and then the blessing that's bestowed on all of us from the Father through the Son." And on the next slide, I point out too that the music is a little bit atypical. I think you'll see that this seems to kind of go back and forth, doesn't? A lot of our hymns kind of have a high point and low point, kind of just floats around a little bit, both rhythmically and harmonically, and it kind of ends on a note that's like, well, now what? So I think this is actually really masterful to me, the way that both the composer of the hymn tune and the author of the hymn text, I think they really had a synergistic meeting in these two, and it just really takes my mind to God's eternality, right? That all of these things have happened to our perception over this great span of time in the history of salvation, but in God's eyes, it's all as a single day. The night and the day are both alike, right, to God. So singing this for me helps me turn my mind to how we witness and participate in all of these acts in one, especially as we share the sacrament at the table together. So let's sing this as we offer our physical gifts.
Amen.
So, a little bit about me. In the past, among the other things I have been called I have been a chorister at the First Presbyterian Church of Washington, Pennsylvania from the time that I was about, Sarah, 7 years old until I was 10. Later in life, I was a bagpiper with the Clay County Sheriff's Department Pipes and Drums. I was the drum major of the Ridgeview High School Marching Band. I was a trumpet player in the U.S. Fighting Gator Marching Band. I was a resident of a little town called Mechlin, Belgium, and I was the Caroline Fellow at Clock Tower Gardens in Lake Wales, Florida. As this indicates, something of a twisty musical journey, and those who know the background, I'm not going to get into all the gory details of my spiritual journey. Kind of mirrors that to some extent. So I'll talk a little bit about some of these. So the reason I was a part-time resident, a full-time resident for a short time of Mechlin, Belgium, is because I play an instrument called the Caroline. So many of you have probably heard this. This is a term that lives many lives. Some people hear Caroline and think of a couple bells, maybe tubular chimes, maybe just a speaker that plays some nice music on the quarter hour. So the Guild of Caroliners in North America, the GCNA, has adopted the following official definition. A musical instrument composed of at least 23 Caroline bells, arranged in chromatic sequence, so tuned as to produce concordant harmony when many bells are sounded together. And importantly, it's played from a keyboard that allows you to be expressive. So one of the reasons that caroliners kind of shy away from some of the bell instruments maybe that have sort of a piano-looking keyboard is that those mechanisms don't allow you to effect dynamics as though you were playing a piano, whereas with a traditional baton clavier, as we call it, you are able to do so. And I'll have some pictures illustrating that, because I imagine you're probably searching deep in the confines of your mind to see if you can conjure up something that looks like this, and I'd be impressed if you could, honestly. So I got into the Caroline when I was studying at the University of Florida. I started studying in 2011 while I was still an aerospace engineering major. Turns out you have to do a lot of math. You can't just guess what might make the plane fly. So I turned to the organ, where mistakes tend to be a little less fatal. But I got into the organ actually kind of through the backdoor way of having started playing the Caroline first. I'd always wanted to play the organ, as I mentioned, and I'll wrap back around to that. I started life early as a chorister in a very fine music program. In fact, the director of music at First Pres in Washington, at the time that Sarah and I were children, is a close friend of Gretchen's, and his name is George Rapp. They hold one another in high esteem. So that shows you, I think, what quality of music program we were reared in. But never touched the organ until much later in life. The Caroline is one of those things that can really kind of grab a hold of you. And so after I caught the bug, I decided with the 6 months that I had to spare before my master's program started that I would go to Belgium and study there for a while. So that was a great 6 months with all the Caroline and chocolate and beer that I could stomach. Following that, when I returned to the States, after I completed the coursework portion of my master's, I headed down to Lake Wales, Florida, which, if any of you are ever in Central Florida or on the west coast of Florida and aren't too far away, I would encourage you to go to the little town of Lake Wales and see this beautiful, beautiful gardens in Caroline called Clock Tower. It's really magnificent. There's not a lot else like it. Actually, here's a fun fact. So there's this great big half-ton bronze door that sits. It's the only entrance and exit from the tower, and it was made by the same Philadelphia-based artist as our altar cross. And so when I found that out, I kind of felt like a little bit of a former home had joined me here. After my time at Clock Tower, I went to Charleston, South Carolina, where I was the Caroliner of Thomas Dryhaven Caroline. And so unfortunately, I didn't have any clips. I wanted to show you a little clip of playing, but couldn't find any on my current computer. The nearest traditional Caroline is at Westminster College in New Wilmington, which is a bit of a trek, but I'm scheming for something a little closer. We'll work on that. on the left there, Sarah and I in the belfry of Bach Tower Gardens. The biggest bell in the 60-bell Bach Tower Carillon is 26,000 pounds. And it is not what you see in the picture. That's probably the 10th or 15th largest bell is the one right behind us there. And it's still about 6 feet tall. And then on the right there, that is what a carillon clavier looks like. That is the clavier of the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist in Perpignan, France. So some other music I like, shape note music. All right. So shape note music is this really cool historical American music. Totally a cappella, no instruments whatsoever. It started in Revolutionary era New England. By the time of the American Revolution, the quality of singing in the churches had gotten so bad because the first settlers, the first European settlers, had brought over their music, and so this was, of course, the first printing press in America didn't come around until about the 1680s, and there have been Europeans here since the 1620s, right? Anglo-Europeans, I should say. And so originally they had a couple books, they had it fresh in their mind. Well, as generations went by, apparently music was really, really terrible in the church by the mid-1700s. And so they devised this whole system, the singing school system, to help congregations learn to sing again. So it started, right in the hotbed of all that cool revolutionary activity. By the 1800s through the 1820s, actually moved south through Appalachia, through part of our region actually, and sort of settled in the deep south, which is what people think about it when it's brought up mostly. Starting in about the 1930s and really picking up in the 60s through the 80s, there was a huge revival. For a long time, people said, oh, that's that old stuff that they just came up with when they didn't have anything better. What use could there be for that? But because it sort of developed in something of a vacuum, shape note music is very different from other styles of hymnody. So the harmonies are very different. The vocal quality that's used is really cool. Totally unrestrained, open-throated, full-chested, really energetic music both to sing and to hear, although it is participatory. There are the way it's set up, we sit in a hollow square, we call it, and we face one another. There's no audience. It's music to sing to one another and to God. It's great stuff. In fact, you probably know more of it than you think. So Amazing Grace actually comes from this tradition, as well as a litany of other examples that have filtered into our hymnal, and I listed a couple there at the bottom. If you jot them down real quick, you can probably look them up while I'm talking. So on the next slide, I give you just a little bit of what it looks like, so you can see why they call it shape notes, because the notes are shaped. And so each shape has a mnemonic syllable, so it works along the same lines as the do-a-dee or female deer style system, except that rather than do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, there are only 4 syllables, so it's fa, sol, la, mi, fa. So this is Amazing Grace. Another interesting thing, the melody in this tradition is always on the 3rd line, the tenor line. It's sung by both men and women, as is the treble line, which we would call the soprano line, maybe in classical styles of music, maybe. So yeah, I just wanted to see what that looks like. Kind of strange, but it works. Otherwise, other than the shapes, it works just like regular, normal round note music. So in this vein of things, for a couple of years, I guess 2017 to 2019 or so, I compiled for the first time a collection of all 150 songs and set them to shape note tunes. Some that I found from historic repertoire and some that I composed myself, entitled The Psalmist's Harp. If you're interested in this style of music, starting on Tuesday, the 6th of July, we are going to be having a weekly shape note singing right here on the campus of Mount Lebanon Church. So for the meantime, while the weather is good and while there's still some virus considerations floating around, we're planning to meet on the portico outside of the Tues room. And then eventually when the weather turns and when conditions are safe enough, we will hopefully move right into our chapel, which that was one of the first things that I thought when I came to this church. Oh gosh, this chapel will be a perfect shape note singing place. So a couple pictures of the book there. After the one on the top left, you can see I actually hand-bound a set of 13 of them when I was kind of still working through some of the snags and so forth, and then had a Kickstarter and self-published a bit more professional looking edition. So that's what you see in the upper right and the lower left. We'll be singing out of at our singings. Most recently, I have been bitten by a new bug, which is that I am interested in repairing pump organs, which, much to the chagrin of my new wife. Hopefully not. But at least a couple of those will be making an appearance. One of those, at least, will make an appearance here once I've refurbished them. So a couple slides forward, and I have a few pictures of a couple of those. So that one is a built between 1876 and 1878, a Mason and Hamlin. They were out of New York. On the left there, intact still as we had purchased it. In fact, in the choir room, if you note the trim of the room. And on the right, disassembled, prepared for some cleaning and repair work. And then on the next slide, my most recent acquisition, an SD pipe organ. I haven't nailed down a date on, or pump organ, excuse me. Haven't nailed down the date on this one, but I'm thinking probably about the same vintage, late 19th century. So, time for you to sing again. So I want us to sing, to get a little taste of what it's like to sing some shape-up music. Now, like I said, if we were doing it the real way, there would be, we have about as many of us here as we would need, but we would want to be sitting in a square facing each other, and we'd all be singing parts. What's going to happen is Timmy and I will just kind of fill in the parts to give you a sense of the harmony. Sarah and Kirby will be with y'all on the melody. So if you're looking in your hymnal, we're at 292, and I think what we've got up here are verses 1, 3, and 4. Let me confirm that real quick so we're not singing different verses. 1, 3, and 4. That's right. My philosophy, I like it all. You've probably kind of already noticed that from what you've heard over these past almost 12 months. Not quite yet. I guess it's been 11 and a half months. The 15th of July was my first day. You've heard classical stuff. You've heard classical stuff that you might be familiar with. You've probably heard some new classical stuff that you haven't interacted with before. You've heard modern stuff. We just sang a modern hymn. You've heard gospel music, both black and white gospel music. You've heard Renaissance music. You've heard Bach. You've heard Wesley. You've heard all kinds of stuff. And I love that because we're all individuals, right? And what speaks to me most strongly might not be what speaks to you, and vice versa. So, you know, we're sort of called to be a Pentecost people in that regard, right? To kind of be speaking in all languages to all people, so that all can be brought in within the embrace of Jesus. Music and worship are inseparable, right? The Scripture bears this out. The Scripture I shared, the Scripture John shared. Certainly, I'm sure you can think of your own examples in Scripture where we're told to make music unto God, to express our thanks and praise in song. But you know, this is even more true for us as Methodists, right? If you've never looked in the front of your hymnal and read John Wesley's rules for singing, I commend those to you. Certainly not during a sermon. Certainly not. But some other time. Take one home with you and read it during the week and bring it back. It's page Roman numeral 7, right toward the beginning. Great stuff, including the Reverend Wesley tells us to sing lustily and of good courage, right? God doesn't want to hear our beautiful noise. He wants to hear our joyful noise. I think that's not news to this congregation. I was impressed early on, even amidst the masked nature of our singing when I first got going. I thought, hey, these people can sing. That's pretty good. Congregational worship, kind of corollary to that, is central to our worship life, right? The invisible underscore there is on congregation. You know, it's great when we can present some stuff up here for you, and of course I like to play some organ music, and I know to a lot of people that helps center you, and of course those are me type activities or us style activities. But the most important thing, the foundation of our musical worship together, is congregational song, and again that's borne out in Scripture, and that's very, very important to me. I'm also kind of a liturgy nut, as you all might have picked up on already. To me, and again, I realize that this is not a universal spiritual experience, but I think that liturgy offers us a really solid foundation, a really strong framework for living out the Christian life, right? It can be hard to keep the big picture in mind as we move along from the day to day. So things like saying morning prayer or evening prayer, either alone or together, and following the liturgical season, the seasons that mirror the natural seasons out in the world. These are things that really help my spiritual heartbeat keep going, that keep me grounded amidst the changes and chances of this life, as one phrase from the Book of Common Prayer puts it. So my grand unified philosophy on church music, I was thinking, gosh, how can I sum up, the things that I believe are most important about church music? And I think you can sum them up with two verses. First being, sing unto the Lord a new song, and the second being, ask for the old paths and walk therein, from Jeremiah. So I think first one is pretty self-explanatory, right? God's mercy is new every day, so why shouldn't we respond in new ways, right? It's if we sang the same old stuff all the time, that would help. So we of course need to continuously be evaluating new music and seeing what sticks and singing the Lord's song in a new way. But I think it's equally important that we don't forget who we are, right? So this verse is actually found in the preface to the Sacred Harp, which is a shape note collection, kind of the grandfather of all of them to a certain extent, at least if you ask some people. And I think this verse, obviously it in Jeremiah is in a more general context of following what our forebears in the faith have laid down for us. But I think it is equally applicable to sacred song as well. I think that it is at our own peril that some of us discard the old stuff simply because it's old, right? I think that again, those people who preceded us in walking this Christian walk, have left us this treasury of, and it's not all good. Just because it's old doesn't mean it's good. Just because it's old doesn't mean it's bad. Just because it's old doesn't mean it's good. But certainly, as I said, I think it's folly to dismiss that. So we again, different things speak to different ones of us. Probably sometimes something speaks to you that you might have thought, oh, I wouldn't have chosen to listen to that on my own, but you know what, that there was something in there for me. So in this spirit of singing unto the Lord a new song, let's sing something that's still pretty new. We had a great celebration here on May the 24th, a wonderful remembrance of that special day in our heritage as Wesleyans, where John and Charles had their strange warming of the heart in London. And so this is one of the Reverend Charles' texts, which I was not familiar with a hymn tune. And so I have a little note on here. I've tried to sprinkle in a couple fun facts. Well, they're fun to me. Maybe these aren't fun facts for other people. But, so did you know that the hymn, when we talk about the hymn, properly speaking, is just words? What the notes that we sing to it are called the tune, or the hymn tune if it's specifically composed. But one of the cool things about metrical hymnody, which is what we call the style of hymnody that we sing for the most part, is that you can kind of, they're basically like musical Legos. You can kind of pop one off of one tune, pop a text off of one tune, and pop it onto another one that fits. The classic example being that you could sing Amazing Grace to the tune of the TV show Gilligan's Island, which I won't do for fear of being struck down, but you can imagine it in your head. So the text then, as I said, the hymn proper was written some time ago by our great forbear, Charles Wesley. But the tune is brand new as of the 21st of May, so let's sing this together. So just a glimpse at what I'm thinking about coming up. I'd like to kind of revamp some of our youth and children's musical offerings. There are some really great curricula out there to train up the young voice in a healthy way and with good technique that I think could really be a boon to our programs here and maybe could be attractive to some of the young people who are already in our community and maybe some who have not yet made it to our community. I'd like to expand our concert offerings to some extent. We've got this almost singularly beautiful organ here and a number of other great instruments beside and talent in-house that just is really incredible. So I'd like us to also try and use that as a way to draw people to our community. I would, in the same vein, like to build and bolster our connections with other churches and music ministries that are in our community. And I know that none of these are groundbreaking, earth-shattering thoughts, and in fact that we have done in the past or are currently doing some of these, but we can always be doing more. And then whatever else John Isaiah puts me up to. So now I would kind of like to hear from you a little bit. Do you like what you've been hearing? Do you think some of it's a little weird? And it's okay if you do. In fact, if you do, and maybe it's growing on you a little bit, then I think we've all won. What would you like to hear more of? What would you like to hear less of? What new initiatives would you like to see? What color are my socks? Whatever comes to your mind. I would like to answer if anybody does have something that they've been wondering or wanted to share, whatever. No? Yeah, John.
How did you put you up to this? Okay.
I got to check my notes on that.
Why don't you talk about possibly programming concert communities and so on?
Okay, sure. Yeah, so I've got a good friend who studied. He was a year ahead of me studying organ at the University of Florida, and a year ahead of me as far as age, but had been playing. I think when we were studying it at UF already for 10 years or something. Really highly skilled. Ended up doing his doctorate at the University of Kansas, which is a very fine music school. And so in my last position, actually, I had him come in, and so he's a huge improviser. He loves to improvise. And so one of the things that he really likes to do is accompany silent films, kind of in the old way of just watching along with the audience and filling in musically what would help illustrate the film. So I think that would be a really great October type program. Especially maybe if we moved the chapel organ down into Asbury Center and set up some screens and had some popcorn and candy and made it an event for the community. I think that would be kind of a cool thing. So yeah, we've got all kinds of fun stuff we can do like that's just sitting there waiting for us to do it. So yes, sir. Yeah, no, I'm absolutely with you. I think that the presence of, that the ministry of presence is an important thing. And we've got this great real estate here, right on this, one of the major arteries in the South Hills, and of course, I was sitting in the North Exit a bit ago and looking and thought, wow, this is great that we have these open doors, but on Sunday mornings people kind of expect they're going to be open, right? When you see an open door of a church on a Wednesday afternoon at lunchtime, maybe we do a 30-minute organ concert then or something. Maybe somebody steps in and says, well, gosh, I didn't even know this was here. And maybe they talk to one of our friendly people and say, well, you know what, maybe I will come back Sunday. It's these little things, right? We have to cast a wide net. I say we have this great piece of real estate, and we do. It reminds me of a joke I've heard. And I'm kind of surprised I haven't mentioned this. I'm an associate member of this congregation, right? But my full membership is maintained at an Episcopal church in Florida that I served for a number of years. And so I really kind of consider myself as having a foot in both camps. But there's a joke about Episcopal evangelization. There's a fish tank at the border of it, on the beach. And one fish is sitting in there and said, "Gee, don't you think we should go out and invite some of the other fish to join us here?" And another fish says, "No, I'm sure they'll drop in if they're interested." So there's a temptation to that, I think, to sit here in our fish tank and look outside and say, "Oh, they'll come in if they want to." And maybe they will, or maybe they won't. But if we're out there saying, "Gosh, wouldn't you like to come in?" I think our batting average would be a little bit better. So, these are all different ways that we can do it. And again, as I've said, what speaks to one person is not going to speak to another. I don't really expect that there will be a roving band of teenagers walking up, on West Liberty Avenue saying, "Oh my goodness, they're having an organ recital, how exciting." There will be some teenagers, they do make teenagers like that, believe it or not, but perhaps not in the majority. But yes, well, I'm glad to hear that I have some assent to at least the general scheme of what I'm thinking. Anybody else? Last chance. Yes, sir.
You mentioned singing choral music at a relatively young age, and you mentioned being a trumpeter in the high school band, that kind of thing. When, in terms of your keyboard work, piano moving toward organ, when did that begin?
Yeah, good question, Pastor Tom. So we had an upright piano in our house in Washington when I was a little kid. We still lived here, and unfortunately, it was one of those, how they used to make them with that great big cast iron soundboard, and this little upright weighed half a ton or whatever. So my mom decided that, well, we don't really want to take that to Florida with us. So that was when I lost my real piano, which was crushing to me. And so my mom had taught me some piano lessons. Then in 5th grade, once we were in Florida, my 5th grade teacher was a piano teacher, so I took some lessons. So those were my first formalized lessons. When I guess it was 8th grade. I was talking about how teenagers are built differently. Well, that switch that seems to be in many teenage boys' brains flipped in my head, and I said, I want to play the guitar. So I asked for guitars for Christmas, and my parents obliged, and they made me call it. It almost broke my heart. They made me call my piano teacher and said, "Well, you want to take one kind of lesson?" And so I had to call her and say, "Ms. Asher, not going to take piano from you anymore." Incidentally, I never took guitar lessons either, so I just kind of fell off the wagon a little bit. But I was already in the band at that time, and so that's kind of where my focus lied. Kind of play at that time. And then, I'm still kind of being steeped in choral music and always kind of liking that sort of style of music making, but didn't really interact with it again seriously until I got to college, which might have been good. I guess probably I got to see some things with fresh eyes, maybe, in a way that perhaps I wouldn't have otherwise. But yeah, so that's kind of my keyboard story. And so I had a lot of late nights in the practice room making up for those lost years from 8th grade until my sophomore year of college. But I think I'm making progress. So that's kind of my keyboard journey in a nutshell, Pastor Tom. So I guess I should say too, because I don't think I've mentioned that. And there's a picture in the slideshow here. So Sarah and I actually lived. That's really. I don't know. I guess I don't know how we met. We were in elementary school together too. But certainly I remember that day. I think it was in 2nd grade. And I could tell something was wrong, and I approached her in the choir room and I said, "You don't still like me anymore, do you?" And she said, "No, I don't." So I walked away, but I guess I still kept that old flame, because about 15 years later I asked her what she was doing for lunch, and well, here we are. So. Anybody else got anything burning a hole in their pocket? No? Okay, well then we probably should be at a pretty good time to go ahead and conclude then. So I've got a little postlude for you here. I know that this is kind of not how we usually do these these things with Prelude and Postlude necessarily, but you know, like John said, how often do you get an organist to do one of these things? And so I thought we'd kind of take the chance to hear something that I played for you this spring, actually. This is a piece by Director Mitchell Stecker, who I understand Buxtehude was a favorite of Bill Wagner's as well. He was playing some Buxtehude. So, but I wanted to play it again anyway because this one. So Baroque music is all about drama, right? And Buxtehude falls into the early Baroque, and so that means that we go from loud and fast to maybe quiet and a little slower, kind of frequently to paint these contrasts. And so, you know, of course, on a regular Sunday when I'm playing it as a postlude, everybody is so excited to greet one another with a sign of peace, which is wonderful, of course. But sometimes maybe the nuances kind of get lost in that. So today, if I could ask you all to do me the favor of sitting just for a couple more minutes, I think you'll be able to get the effect of this piece a little more. And another little fun fact here. So sometimes in the bulletin you might see, oh, that's weird. It looks like he just kind of smashed his hand down on the keyboard a bit. So that string of letters and stuff, Bach's VW 137. So a lot of early music composers didn't actually title their pieces. They just kind of wrote it out and said, okay, here you go. And well, what's this? Well, let's see. It's a prelude, it's a fugue, and it's a chaconne, and it's in C. So here you go. It's the prelude, fugue, and chaconne in C. And so he didn't write more than one prelude, fugue, and chaconne in C, but he did write a couple, for instance, preludes in F. And it's like, well, how do you tell those apart? Oh, this is the first one and this is the second one. Well, kind of in essence. So that's what these are catalog numbers. You see those with Mozart's music, with Bach's music, with some other composers who had a lot of output. So just a couple notes as you're kind of listening, because I always find it's helpful if the person who knows the music well kind of keys me in. So it starts with this big flashy pedal solo that lasts for a good amount of time at the very beginning. Really stylistically central to the North German Baroque style, which is what Buxtehude was. Another fun fact about Dietrich Buxtehude, so he was about 40 years older than Johann Sebastian Bach, but he was like one of Bach's musical idols. The story goes that for one time, for a short span of time, Bach walked 200 miles to go study with Buxtehude, and he had asked his boss for something like 3 weeks off and came back like 6 months later. I won't try that because I'm not Bach. You can replace me. You can't replace Bach. So I also want you to be listening for the fugal sections, right? We think Bach, we think fugue. Buxtehude also did a lot with the fugue. Lots of imitative counterpoint, meaning something played in one hand, repeated in the other. And then it concludes with this chaconne, this jubilant, excited chaconne. And so a chaconne is when you have sometimes it is called ground bass. When you have a certain bass line and it just repeats again and again. Pachelbel's Canon in D is actually another example of that kind of that format where we have that da-dum, 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 da-dum. It just repeats the entire duration of the piece. So that's what the chaconne does as well. While I play, I've asked Jim if he won't cycle through some of the pictures so that you can see some of the scenes that I've been describing to you. So enjoy Buxtehude's Prelude, fugue, and chaconne.